As I promised, we would bring the evaluations around. So as you listen to the other presenters, you can be doing that whilst we go. So at this time, I am going to invite Mr. Nathan Hermond. He's going to talk to us about insects affecting strawberries. As I mentioned earlier, when you deal with any plant, we have the good guys and we have the bad guys. So he's going to give us some insights on those. So with that said, Mr. Hermond, the mic is yours now.
Uh, no, sorry. Oh, here we go. All right. Just took a minute to. Oh, click it and drag down. Oh. All right. Why is it doing that? There we go. All right. So today, as Dr. Ampim said, we are going to be discussing some of the insects that are affecting strawberries, and I'm going to include both pest insects that will be eating the strawberries as well as the beneficials that are protecting the strawberries. There we go. All right, and so a couple points that I want to cover today are, of course, specific species and their impact on strawberries, as well as the life cycles, because life cycles are important to understanding how to manage insects, because some of the life cycles are actually going to impact your timing, as well as whether or not you'll be able to manage the insect during a certain point of their life. I'm also going to go over some of the unique behaviors that insects exhibit, and sometimes, in some cases, their relations to one another and their interactions with other animals as well. And of course, I'll go over the different management tactics for each of the pest insects, and of course, the beneficial insects as well. So, so we're going to go ahead and start with the strawberry root weevil. Now, weevils are very unique. They're actually a type of beetle, but they tend to have a long snout with chewy mouth parts at the end. So they'll, of course, typically be chewing on the leaves as adults. One of the things that makes this a little bit easier to manage is the fact that it has a single generation. And so the larvae actually come out of the ground during the winter at the end of the season once strawberries have matured and will actually begin. That's when they'll begin feeding. And then they'll continue to develop into adults as spring starts. So the great thing with that means that once you've actually controlled it, you don't have to worry about additional generations coming in later in the year. So like I said, they do pupate in the soil and then they emerge as adults to feed on the leaves. The larvae typically devour roots and they will actually go after other plants. So if you have like corn and other plants that you're planting alongside, if you're planting later in the year, when you have larvae, they're actually going to go after the roots as well. So something else about this insect I should mention. They do like to invade homes, so you might actually find a few populations of weevils inside your home as well. They don't really do any damage. That's usually just for shelter, so they're not going to go after grain or anything like that. But it's something to watch out for. And so this is an insect that you really need to inspect fields for leaf damage to determine, are the adults out already? And of course, we live in Prairie View in Texas, so the weather's quite a bit warmer. So that is going to influence, the fact that these insects are actually going to be out earlier because we're going to have an earlier winter. So winter is going to end closer to March compared to in some other areas. It goes all the way through March. So that's going to be an impact on this. So something interesting that I found out is that there's actually a nematode solution that's available on the market that you can actually apply directly to the root area, and that's beneficials are great for dealing with insects because you don't have to worry about buying really expensive pesticides. And if you have a organic garden, which I know a lot of folks around here do, this is a great way to deal with those pests without, you know, using pesticides and getting disrupting that process. It takes a second. There we go. All right, so aphids. So aphids are sucking insects. So that means they're actually directly draining nutrients from the plants. And they actually do come in like a rainbow of colors. You can have black, red, yellow, green, white, any color you can imagine pretty much. And so something interesting is that the reason they have such a high population on plants is due to parthenogenesis, which is where the females will actually, instead of laying eggs, they'll actually have the eggs inside them, and then the eggs will hatch inside them, and then they'll give like a live birth, but it's not real live birth. And they continue. It's like a factory. They just continue pumping out the nymphs, and so the young and the adults will actually live together in a colony. And so, of course, we know that lady beetles love feeding on aphids, both the adults and the larval stage of lady beetles, and also lacewings. And so, there's actually several species of beneficial insects that will feed on aphids, but lady beetles and lacewings are the main ones. Something interesting is that ants will actually use aphids as a form of livestock because aphids produce a sticky substance from the food that they eat called honeydew, and you can actually eat that if you see it on plants. You can eat it. It's perfectly fine. I would do that. I'm an entomologist though, so. All right. Red imported fire ants. We all know everybody here is familiar with those, and we all hate them. So we got to talk about them. So they are invasive species, and they displace natives because they're aggressive. So any other ant colonies, they'll actually invade those colonies and take them over. Of course, they have a painful bite and sting, and usually it's a large number of them that are biting and stinging you at the same time. So it's pretty unpleasant. So interestingly, their nests can get so big that they can disrupt farming equipment. They can stop you from traversing the field because if there's nests everywhere, you really don't want to step in one. And they can, if you have livestock in the area, they can actually harm your livestock as well. So the queen, similar to the female aphids, the queen is constantly pumping out eggs, which become the workers. So the hive just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So ants are omnivores. They can feed on seeds, leaves, fruits, human foods, even other animals as well. So if you have, like I said, if you have chickens or if you have smaller animals, that will actually attack those sometimes, especially at night. And so there are a couple of management tactics, all of which are chemical, because there are very few beneficial insects that will actually go after red imported fire ants just because they're so mean. Um, and so one of the major ones that I actually discovered and that I know is used pretty commonly, especially if they get into your home as well, is a boric acid dust, and that kills them immediately. It coats their body and it messes up their breathing apparatus, and it just kills them straight away. And they'll actually take that into the nest as well, and so it'll get on the other ants in the hive. Then there are pellet applications, which they actually ingest. They think it's food, so they ingest it, they collect it, and they take it to the queen because, of course, the queen has to eat as well. So then that actually does kill the queen. So now, if you have a larger operation, there's actually a few chemicals that you can actually incorporate into the sprinklers, and they'll actually spray onto the field, and that will take care of the ant nests. And if anybody has questions, feel free to just interrupt me if you need to. So, yes. So you're really aiming at you want to aim at the queen, but you're also killing because really killing the workers just more going to replace them. So you're really trying to kill the whole population because even if a few workers are left over, they can actually some of them can mate and still reproduce a new hive. So you do want to kill the queen and then kill the whole hive. So boric acid should, yeah, if it coats them and it gets, because you don't just spray a little bit, you really like coat them with it, and when they're out and about, you really hit them at the nest site, and so then they'll take it into the hive and it'll get on the rest of the workers and the queen, and it will kill them. So yeah, it's the boric acid dust. Yes, I'm sorry. No, it's something that actually gets on the ants itself, and they take it into the hive. And so that's the good thing about this, as well as the pellets. They're actually transporting it directly to the source. Yes, sorry. I f- I would say the most cost efficient, depending on the size, is probably going to be the liquid application, just because it's going to be able to effectively treat a larger area. And since that you can actually incorporate that into the sprinklers as well, that's going to be now if you have a drip irrigation, I'm not sure if that works the same way, but if you have a traditional sprinkler, it should be able to um, effectively treat a larger area. Something else I've actually tried doing myself, and someone else told me about this, and I've tried it, is soapy water. Actually, that works pretty fast. It doesn't even take like an hour to take out the whole hive. Um, Soapy water, just pour it in there. I would do it at night if you don't want to get bitten, because I did it and I still got bitten after I was dealing with the hive. So, if you do it at night and you just pour soap in and pour some water, you should be able to. It'll kill off pretty much the whole hive. So that's another thing you can do. Now that's not efficient on a large scale. So like a large farm, it's not efficient to go around to each hive, and But if you have a small garden and you're growing strawberries and you have ant mounds, that's something you can do as well. So the next insect we're going to talk about is thrips. This is kind of random, but thrips are actually that's not plural, that's singular. So if you say plural, it's thrips. Singular, it's still thrips with an S. And so they're elongated insects. They look like little brown specks, and they usually hang out on the flowers and sometimes on the fruits. Okay. Um, and they're sucking insects as well, just like the aphids. And so they're usually going to be on the underside of the plants, and something that could be a big problem because in some situations people put up nets to block out insects, but since these are so small, it actually blocks out the beneficial insects, and then the thrips just the population booms, and that can happen with any of the insects that are really small as well. Um, so a foliar insecticide is good for these, just because that's where they usually hang out at. And true bug predators, so assassin bugs, pirate bugs, any of those smaller predators are really going to be good for dealing with thrips as well. And the way you can actually inspect for thrips is to take the flowers and either take a sheet of like notebook paper and like shake the flour onto it, and if you see little specks falling off and they start moving, then that's thrips. It just takes a while to, okay. And white flies. So white flies are, you could tell why they're called white flies. They're small white insects that usually hang out on plant leaves. And I mentioned about where if you use a mesh in a greenhouse, they can actually block out the predators. This is another example of that. And so they have partial metamorphosis. So the eggs turn into, instead of turning into larvae, they become nymphs, which are just miniature versions, and then they grow into an adult. And these also excrete honeydew, which bees, wasps, and ants will also go after as a food source. This can actually create a secondary pest because honeydew, if it stays on the plant too long, can actually create a sooty mold that adds to your problem. So it's a good idea to get rid of these because you're actually getting rid of two pests at once in that case. And so you can actually incorporate some beneficial insects. Lacewings will hunt down whiteflies. Parasitoid wasps, what they'll do is they'll sting them, sting insects, and then basically kidnap them and feed them to their larvae. And so that's how parasitoids work. Of course, assassin bugs and pirate bugs as well will disrupt their whole reproduction system. So all right, so we're going into a few beneficial insects, including parasitoid wasps, which I just mentioned, and there are several different families of these, but they do essentially the same thing. Some of them will sting insects and lay the eggs in, and there's a video on it that I suggest you watch. It's terrifyingly disgusting, but it's very educational. And they'll sting the insect. The eggs are laid inside, and then when they pupate, you'll see like white balls on the insect itself, and then the larva will come out, or the wasp will actually come out from the insect inside out. So it's kind of like aliens in a way. And so they are, of course, they're predatory. And like I said, some will simply kidnap the pest insect and take it to the nest to use as larval food. All right, so lady beetles. So lady beetles are going to be the primary predator for aphids. And so both the adults and the larvae will feed on aphids. And in fact, the larvae will feed on them even more voraciously. So a single lady beetle can ingest around 5,000 aphids in its entire life cycle. And then, like I said, they usually live in like a little community together. And so sometimes they have to compete with the fire ants as well, since they like to harvest the aphids. So these are actually the ones I pictured here are all the same species. They're the Asian lady beetle. They just have different physical dimorphism based on the weather and other things like that, but they are the same species. And like I said, the larvae are a little bit more aggressive. They also will eat mealy bugs, which are little white, puffy little. They look like little white worms that you'll find on fruits and vegetables. They'll eat white flies, scales, which are usually on trees, and pretty much other sucking insects that are pests as well. So lady beetles, definitely good to have them in your garden. You can actually order these online as well. And lacewings. Lacewings are very vicious. You can actually see them at your, if you have a bright porch light, you can actually see them at your door at nighttime. And that's what they look like. They're green. They've got clear wings with veins in them, so you can kind of tell what they look like. And anything that they'll really eat anything that's a pest, as long as it's not too big. Like they won't eat wasps or spiders or anything like that, but they'll eat any of the things we talked about today. And they'll actually hide in grasses and weeds. So it's good to leave weeds around your farm to that's going to benefit the beneficial insects and actually bring them in, and that's going to be where they hide out. There's actually a green and brown variant, so they both do the same thing. They're just different colors, and the larvae will also eat pests as well. So. And assassin bugs are very aggressive. They usually just hang out on the leaves. They come in several different colors, including orange, brown, black, and most of them are beneficial insects. There are a few that do attack humans, but most of them are going to eat insects. And they're sucking predators, so they'll actually attack and kidnap prey and drain them of the nutrients and kill them that way. So. And those are some of the references if you guys are interested in some of these insects. And does anybody have questions for me? All right, thank you guys. All right.
I would like to use this opportunity to interject a little bit. I know this is not in the program and we are kind of running a little behind, but just a couple of announcements too. I will start with one that Ms. Angela Moore will come and give us, and then after that, I would invite Mr. Joshua Coleman. He's the County Executive Director for Farm Service Agency. So after Ms. Moore,
Okay, well,
Good afternoon. Well, good morning, everyone. I just want to speak with you very briefly about the Prairie View Farmers Market that's held here on the campus of Prairie View A&M University. May I please see a show of hands of anybody who's heard of it? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That lets us know that the word is getting out. May I also know and see the hands of those who have purchased from the farmers market? Okay, I see a few hands going up. What we're wanting to get the word out about is that we're going to be resuming the farmers market in the month of February. The market is seasonal and it runs from February through December of each year. And we recently decided that we're going to do it the first week of every month on the first Thursdays and the first Saturdays. You should have seen at the registration table a flyer that speaks to the farmers market as well as the schedule of the upcoming dates. What I just wanted to share with you this morning is that we're growing the farmers market and we want to encourage all of our producers to consider participating in the market. As a resident of the city of Prairie View myself, I know firsthand that there is a need for fresh produce in this area. We are in a food desert. To get fresh produce, we either have to drive a little bit to the east to Waller or a little to the west to Hempstead. So I can say personally that there is a built-in market here for you. And not only would it benefit the residents of the city of Prairie View, it would also benefit the students and employees here as well. So with that in mind, I also wanted to mention that we do have an incentive for the producers. The first 20 people, the first 20 producers to enroll to become a vendor at the farmers market will have their registration fees waived. So if you should wish to participate in the farmers market, please see me to get an application, and we'd love for you to get signed up today. If you have any questions about it, please direct those questions to either me or Dr. Clarence Bunch. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all this morning. I am Joshua Coleman. I'm the County Executive Director for the Harris Montgomery Waller County Farm Service Agency. And I just want to take a second to kind of inform you all about one of the programs that we have available that covers strawberries and other fruit and vegetable crops. And it's our Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, more commonly known as NAP. So NAP does cover strawberries and other crops from eligible causes of losses that are due to adverse weather conditions, any adverse natural occurrences that may occur, such as volcanoes or earthquakes, anything like that, and then any related, directly related instances of maybe diseases, pests, and things of that nature. It does have a service fee of $325 per crop, but that service fee waiver can be waived for beginning farmers and ranchers, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, veteran farmers and ranchers, and limited resource farmers and ranchers as well. The basic coverage is at 50% of the production at 55% of the market price, and buy-up coverage is also available at increments of 50 to 65% and covers up to 100% of the market price under that program. For the 2020 crop year, the sales closing date unfortunately is already passed. But for 2021 crop year, the sales closing deadline will be September the 1st of this year. So pretty much with that program, you'll complete an acreage report with us. You'll sign up for the coverage for it, and if you do have any eligible causes of losses, file a notice of loss, and then we'll send a loss adjuster out to go ahead and do an assessment on it to kind of see what the damages things may have been. But I'll be around for the rest of the program, so if you have any questions, just see me after the program ends. Also, Miss Linda Burrow, she's the farm loan officer in the Belleville office, and she covers our area. So if you have any farm loan questions, she's here today as well. But if you have any questions, just feel free to see us after the program ends today.
Yeah.
All right, so Dr. Wallace is going to talk about the next part of his presentation, and that is just going to be talking about the project, the Canaan project that we are working on. It's sponsored by the Texas Department of Agriculture under the Specialty Crop Initiative, okay? And that's, again, a collaboration between us, him, and some farmers. We have farmers in here that we are working on the project with us, Mr. and Mrs. Woods. They are one of our collaborative farmers from Prairie View, and he has others from Cooperative and
Arlington and Lubbock, Mansfield.
and the Dallas Fort Worth area. Okay? All right. So, Dr. Wallace, over to you.
So I think I've already put on 12,000 miles this fall. So anyways, somebody was asking me about cost of production, and this is what I've estimated for our Lubbock area if you want to do an acre of strawberries, but it also includes low tunnels. So it's plastic mulch, drip tape, wire hoops, plastic row cover. That's a pretty significant cost for an acre. And that doesn't necessarily include shipping or labor costs here. So this is just basically for an acre. So if you have most acres are about anywhere from 14,000 to 17,000 plants. So if you're growing a couple of thousand plants, you can just divide that by 7 or 8 and get some cost. And there may be cheaper ways of doing it as well. Fungicides, that could be, well, anyways, you can see here if you want to take a picture of it. If you can get a 1.25 or 1 to 1.5 pounds per plant roughly, times 14,000 plants is about 18,000 pounds. And if you can get $5 to $7, you're going to be making that much. Or you could actually, if you have a lower price, it won't be quite that high. But anyway, so there's potential there, but there's always going to be some losses. You got to include labor in that as well, and some equipment costs as well. But there is high potential. Perhaps you can sell them at the farmers market or contract with a local grocery chain. Or another way is to get with restaurants. Restaurants love to provide local food and produce. So if you can get connected with somebody who wants that's a good way. And again, don't undersell your strawberries. All right, I keep wanting to say that. Well, these costs, they look kind of high, don't they? But you go to California, and the costs are $60,000 per acre just to produce strawberries. They get 4 to 5 pounds per plant, so they get a lot higher. Their season's longer, but they spend a lot of money just to get those horrible tasting fruit to your grocery store. Hopefully nobody's from California here. What's that? Okay. I'm a Fresno State graduate, so I can make a little bit of claim there. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought you were saying you were from California. Okay. Right. Yes, that's for one harvest season. So, but some of those are reusable, like the plastic covers on the low tunnels. We've used those for 2 years. They get a little bit, they're not as clear the second year. They're a little more opaque, but they still have worked. So, all right. So we're going to talk about our Texas Department of Agriculture project, which is an SCRI block grant collaborative project with Prairie View A&M and a bunch of growers. And I think we've got about 7 or 8 growers on the project as well. So, first question you need to ask yourself is, what's worse than finding a worm in your strawberry? There you go. That's speaking like an entomologist, finding half a worm, right? Okay. We'll move on. I'm going to try to make this pretty quick. So this grant began in 2018, ends this September, but we're trying to increase the productivity and resiliency of Texas-grown strawberries, okay? Because it is a state that well, at least we have more acreage than Alabama, I can say that. So, but we have about 250 acres, but it is steadily, slowly increasing. And there's more growers, but again, they're starting out small. And one thing I wanted to concentrate, I think I told somebody during the break, is if you're going to start growing strawberries, again, start small, purchase 1,000 plants, maybe 2,000 at the most, and learn how to grow those really well, and then start expanding. Because otherwise, you may get really discouraged. Let me put that up. You may get discouraged, and then you may lose out on the benefits of growing strawberries. All right, I've got that one again. We're going to pass by that. So we do have here some trials at Prairie View A&M University, and hopefully if I don't talk so long, we can get out there and see them. Or maybe that'll allow more time for them to dry. So, but we've also got some in Poteet. Right. Yeah, on research, we tend to do things a little differently sometimes, but our spacing, I think many growers, it depends on what your production's for. Like in Poteet, there is a grower who has wider spacing in between, so he can run a tractor through there, level out the ground for his U-pickers, because he's all just U-pick. If you're looking more at production and you have workers that are going to be harvesting, you probably want to go closer and get more advantage out of your workers. But you don't want to get too thin. I've seen in Florida where the strawberry beds were only about this far apart, and maybe a foot and a half. And so they're just going for production. And once the market hits, it was interesting because when I was there a couple of years ago, the fields were just looking beautiful. There was tons and tons of strawberries, but nobody, the grower said, we just quit picking yesterday. And I said, why is that? He goes, because California market opened up. And so the prices dropped, so it cost them more to pick than it would to leave them alone. So they didn't pick. Yes? Uh-huh. That would be advisable, yes. Right. In my high tunnels, I actually increased without crop rotation for 3-4 years. And then after that, it started dropping because I didn't rotate. But I was limited by my high tunnels and the project because and I wanted the disease. Yeah, so that can happen. But don't get discouraged. Yeah. So, all right, here's Poteet. They're further along now. This was taken earlier in the fall, or probably January, or December. Yeah, December. So you can see the low tunnels here. We're looking at those. We've got some soil inoculant trials here, trying to improve root growth and crown growth in the fall. And then this is our fertilizer trial. And you can see here between each of these orange stakes that there's a different look. There are different varieties. I believe this is Albion here. It's kind of a smaller plant. But back towards here is where Fronteras is, and it just really likes less fertilizer. The plants grow bigger. The more fertilizer, I think this is Fronteras here. It's a little bit hard. It's a little bit deceptive because it's closer. But the plants right now are just not as big. Yes? Well, after our entomologist spoke, he said keep the weeds, but we want to get rid of the weeds. You can maybe keep the weeds around the edge so you can invite beneficials in, but weeds can take away from the overall production. We do, in the Northeast, they'll put straw and stuff in there so you could walk in the alleyways, but in our area, maybe that's potential here, but in our area, that just blows away in the wind. So others have planted grass, kind of make it easier for people to walk on if it gets wet and you still have a U-pick operation. So there are things you can do. The other thing is if your area isn't too big, just get that weed fabric and that'll help keep the weeds down. And that's multiple years use. Yeah, you can mow them. Yeah, you can plant something else after. But growers asked me that too, can we plant strawberries in the same spot the next year? And we did that one year where we planted black-eyed peas in the tunnel, in the holes that we had our strawberries in. Black-eyed peas were great. I mean, they were this tall in the tunnel. They were just outstanding. Couldn't get any of the employees to go work and pick them, but they all wanted them delivered. And it's like, no, sorry about that. But then I took those out and replanted strawberries again in those same holes, and it was a total disaster. Didn't work for me. So, because they like that new ground, they like the ground worked, so that because those roots are going to need that soil needs to be worked so they get oxygen down to those roots. So that's why if you use the bed multiple times, it's probably not going to work. In Arlington, I was telling some of the people outside that in Arlington, there's a grower, Johanna Storm, and she's only been growing for about 4 years, and she's doing better and better. But on her farm, where we also have some trials similar to what we're doing here, she's the only U-pick grower in Dallas-Fort Worth area, and she charges $8 a pound for U-pick. And people don't complain. And if she has to pick them for them, she charges $10. So they make it a family event, go out and pick. But I mean, one weekend she said she made like $20,000. So that makes up for a lot of effort. And all this is done. She runs the farm pretty much by herself and maybe one half-time employee. So, yeah. So this is how we apply our fertilizers. We have different treatments in here. So like a low rate, high rate, and middle rate. And so we apply by using these CO2 charged tanks, kind of like beverage containers, and we apply our certain rate of fertilizer over a 50-foot piece of ground, our plots, and then those are randomized throughout the plot block too. So that way we know we get certain amounts, that low, medium, and high rates, we know that we get those on there in order to evaluate. And then underneath here, you can't really see because this is in Lubbock, we've got our plastic over there, but we've got 5 varieties in there, and that's where we're seeing the differences, where the low fertility rate is actually better for some strawberry varieties, where the high is better for others. All right, so we'll just go past that. Again, here we are transplanting different varieties, and again, this crew has been with me for a couple of years, and they know what to do, so make sure your plants are planted correctly, otherwise your strawberries aren't going to grow very well. Then we do berry evaluations. We look at size. We count the number of berries per plant. So if you want a springtime job, that's something that's a lot of fun. You can see how many berries are there, and that's just one harvest. Then we look at bricks, which is the sugar, the amount of sugars or sweetness in berries, and that can vary across different varieties. And one of the worst varieties I can't produce it very well. It just may be the area, was Ruby June, but it's the sweetest berry. I've got 11.5 bricks on that, whereas Albion was closer to 8 or 9. But we did taste tests with the employees at the research farm, and Ruby June came in the bottom, and Albion came on top. So sweetness, and that's subjective because a lot of people like sweet, some like tart. I'm more of a tart berry, sweet but tart, but not fully ripe. Oh, that reminds me too. This is just yields, and these are getting lowered, but we can get as high as 1 pound. I've had as high as 2 pounds per plant in my third year of production where we were doing really well. But now we're getting this is Ruby June. It just didn't produce for me. But Camarosa, Camino Real, that's pretty steady. And you can see the differences between high tunnel and low tunnel on average. And that's not a very good yield. I would like that almost doubled. But here's outside. Outside, this is kind of standard for us. You're going to get a lot more production in a high tunnel. And speaking about high tunnels, the one thing I forgot to mention is if you have a farm, there are programs through the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. I always say that backwards, but there is a EQIP program where they will pay the costs of high tunnels up to a certain amount. I'm not exactly sure, but if you own a farm, make sure your farm's registered and make sure that you can. What I would do, because I've talked to a lot of people across the state, is many of the NRCS conservationists don't know about the program. Maybe they do, but this has been a couple of years. But I would print off everything you can off the internet that says Texas or Natural Resources Conservation Service High Tunnel Initiative, and take that in. And I've had growers where a lot of the NRCS reps are asking people to put up tunnels. They've got the money. So make an application. You may not get it the first round, but generally everybody who's applied that I know of has gotten a high tunnel. Yes. I don't believe there is. Right. Yeah, it's a good program. In our area, we've had, I don't know if I have a photo of it, but we had a grower who got 2 of them. And unfortunately, after 5 months, they both blew down in a tornado. But ours have been standing for 10 years. But it's a good program if you want to get started. And a good way to start learning to grow strawberries is in a high tunnel. The other thing is that I know probably 5 or 6 in the Lubbock area who were just strictly cotton farmers who got high tunnels. So I wouldn't think that would limit you. All right. Okay, so this is how we do bricks. So here you can see the bricks is the sugars. And Chandler was kind of low, which is kind of surprising because it's got really good flavor. But, and a lot of times it depends on how you pick it, all right? But we always pick them when they're fully ripe so that we can tell. Because, you get to the grocery stores and a lot of them are half white still or half green. But we have this little digital bricks meter. We just put a couple of drops of juice on that, and it'll tell us what our bricks level is. So you can see here, Ruby June was very high, or at least high for us. Chandler was less, but I like the taste of Chandler much better than I do Ruby June. So yes. No, the flavor numbers are just evaluation that we did on the research farm, the employees. So, but they didn't know which varieties, which ones were which, but they did pick. So a 3 is low. So 1.1 Albion they liked the best. Ruby June they didn't, and maybe they just don't like sweet berries. Yes. Some growers have done Seascape. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Albion's probably the golden standard for poteet. All right. So we'll talk about fertilizing. Again, you've kind of seen this. We've kind of discussed this over again. But part of our project is to look at fertility across the state and find out how much growers are putting out, how much we can add to it, and whether or not we're getting good production based on the varieties we're growing. So we've already seen this, so I can go through this pretty quick. This was last year. These strawberries, this is several different varieties. They actually looked really good until we quit harvesting. And then about three weeks before the last harvest, I quit fertilizing. And by the time we were done, you can see that different varieties have different levels of iron chlorosis. Here's San Andreas. Got a lot of iron chlorosis right there. Camino Real, not quite so much. Fronteras has quite a bit. Camarosa has quite a bit. But then we get to Albion. Look at that. It's still green, even after 3 weeks after not fertilizing anymore. But Chandler looks like that. So you can tell that kind of piqued my interest as to, hey, these varieties, some need more nitrogen than others. So, all right. And the product that we're using, again, this is a slow release or control release fertilizer that we put in furrow. It's called Agriform 18813. Now, it's difficult to get hold of. They've apparently never sold to anybody in Texas. They've only sold to California. I had one grower from a workshop call them up and tried to get some product. And he goes, the only person we've ever sold to is Russ Wallace, and I've never even purchased it. I just get free samples. So that's what we're looking at. And then we have we're injecting the different formulations, which are right here. So we're trying to see, maybe they won't sell to us in Texas because their concentration is in California. But if we can find the right ratios throughout the season, like perhaps we need more phosphorus at the beginning of the season, help develop more root system, deeper root system, better strengthening of the plant. And then later on, we go with a balanced fertilizer, and then we start adding calcium and magnesium plus micros as the plant develops further. So you get increased flowering and increased better overall ripening and taste. So, and a lot of people add calcium because that helps with the firmness of the strawberries. And in the 2 leaf analysis that I've already got some data on, we did see higher rates of nitrogen in certain plants, but we also saw that other varieties liked calcium better. And those were the varieties that were firmer, like Albion. It took up a lot of calcium, and so it's got a berry that's more firm, which is good for shipping and things. So this just shows Fronteras. This was in December, so it's kind of hard to see, but here's Fronteras at the low rate. You can see that it's starting to cover the entire bed. And now those plants are like 3 times that size. And they've got a lot of already pollinated flowers on them, fruit developing. And here's the medium rate and the low rate. You can kind of see a progression of the plants getting smaller as the rates are getting higher. So it doesn't really need it. And then this is the has to grow, which is the grower standard. So you can see that was why I was thinking with their standard, their plants are small and they're not getting enough nitrogen. They're not getting enough fertilizer. But with Chandler up here, the production actually the plants get it bigger as you go up towards 180 pounds. So that's where we're seeing the differences in varieties. And hopefully this test will show some of that. All right. I'm going to make sure it's almost 11:30. All right. So we're also looking at root biostimulants. They can be natural products or plant extracts, but what they do is they promote healthier roots. And I've seen that in our previous work where I actually had one biocontrol product that was a trichoderma, and these are natural beneficial or fungi or bacteria in the soils that actually will feed on certain other pathogens. Like here's trichoderma feeding on Pythium, and Bacillus is this bacteria. And what they do is they take up the space where the diseases would actually attack the roots. But they also increase root production, increase the root hairs, and you get better uptake. So one year we had with trichoderma, it didn't control the diseases like I wanted, but the plants were bigger and it actually outproduced the chemical control. So there are some benefits to adding these products to your roots. And this just shows what we're doing this year. We have BioShot, which actually is rice bran wax and rapeseed. And then BioSeed, which is, I'm not even going to say that one, but they're Bacillus species and also plus trichoderma. Mycorrhizae are another one, is another fungi that's beneficial. Oxidate is hydrogen dioxide plus periacetic acid or vinegar. And TerraGrow has like 5 bacillus plus trichoderma. You can find some of these products that have like 10 different organisms in them. So there's a lot of them out there. I used to call them like snake oils. You've heard that kind of term before. And so really, if you're going to do a test of these products, do it in a small area. Don't treat the entire field and say, oh yeah, it worked really well this year. I'm going to, do that. Do a couple of rows, see if it benefits, make sure it's on the same variety, okay? So that you can get a fair test. Root Shield Plus is the one that I was talking about that did really well. Didn't control the diseases as well as I liked, but we actually had pretty high yields. And then Double Nickel. Those are the 2 standards that I would recommend for people to use in these cases. I'm gonna, this kind of shows, here's the non-treated plots, and really you can't see a big difference. So, whether they're actually working, but you can't really see the roots either. So the roots may be different. And that's what we'll also be looking at is root structure and how well the roots are under the ground. And weed management. This was my field towards the end of the season. We got lazy. We weren't hoeing as much because we were picking all the time. So, but weeds can cause problems. Especially if you have a U-pick. Nobody wants to get out there unless they're really naturalists to want to get out there and fight the weeds. But too many weeds out there can also increase your humidity around the foliage, cause some powdery mildew, or also gray mold on the fruit. And they're also good places for mice and rats to hide, which will eat the seeds of your berries, if you remember that. So, there are a bunch of organic herbicides, and again, I wouldn't bother to write these down. If you want to take a photo, that's fine, but you will get a copy of this. And for most of the organic herbicides, the plants have to be really, really small. They have to all be just barely past cotyledon stage because these are all contact herbicides. They have to burn the plant down. If it's any bigger than that and you don't control those, you don't hit those buds and kill the buds of the plants, it's just going to regrow. That's why that's the wonder of Roundup, because Roundup moves down throughout the plant and into the roots, and so it can kill perennial weeds, whereas these will only kill weeds that are really, really tiny, and you might have to make multiple applications. But that clove oil and cinnamon product, Weed Zap, it really smells nice when you put it out. But again, it yeah, there are some techniques that we used to use. It was called a stale bed technique. And what we would do in the Northeast is we would plow the ground, disc it, let the weeds grow up, and then hit it with a herbicide to knock it down. So it didn't have any pre-emergent activity, just had post-emergent. And then you go in and plant, and you don't get as many weeds because that first flush was already killed. That make sense? No, there's no organic pre-emergent. It's all contact, and there's no organic herbicides that translocate like Roundup does down into the roots. So if you hit Bermuda grass or whatever grass you guys have down here, it may burn the top of it off, but it's going to regrow within a week or 2. Same with larger weeds. That's why I suggest they got to be no more than half an inch tall. Make sure you kill the buds. Oops. I'm not going to go over much herbicides because you have to have pretty much a TDA license to purchase these, but we are looking at different products to look at weed control. This is the only grower in Poteet that I know because the father is still an old timer. In Poteet, they would produce strawberries on 40-inch rows without black plastic, and they just hoe and hoe and hoe. The fields were really clean, but we did some trials with herbicides out there, and he was kind of going, maybe these herbicide things are a good deal because they spend so much money on hand hoeing weeds that if they can save a couple of months of hand hoeing using a herbicide, then that's going to save them money because a lot of these herbicides are only $15 to $20 an acre to use. So for you strawberry growers already, dual magnum is not labeled in the state yet, but through this research, we hope to get a special local needs for Texas to see if we can get that. It's a good one for controlling nutsedge, okay? Prowl H2O is labeled. Use a higher rate on coarse soils. Here's Prowl H2O, high rate and low rate. Spartan is one that's new to us, but it is registered, and we are in other states, but not mentioned under clear plastic. We're trying it under plastic, but we also have it in this field. So we've got it at a couple of locations trying it, and so far it looks pretty good. There's just not a whole lot of herbicides for strawberries out there, and we've already talked protective covers. There's some nice strawberries. So if we can do it in Lubbock, I know you can do it here. And we've already talked about those. This is what happens when you get 10 inches of wet snow on your low tunnels. It just flattens them out. But we just went through and rebent all the hoops. That just shows putting those out. And I should be almost done. Is that... Well, anyways, I had video of her going down the row and, oh, there it was. Well, she didn't do a good job on that one, but she's a plant pathology graduate student, so that explains a little bit. Just teasing. All right. This year we actually took some of the plastic off. We're going to test it, but it was only because there are two new varieties, Liz and Rocco, and they look really huge in the fall. So we thought, well, let's give it a try. So we have some covered and some uncovered. Yeah. Right. So that was a 45-mile-an-hour wind. Let's go to the 60 to 85,000 mile per hour wind. There you go. That's Lubbock, Texas, all the way. So you can see those tunnel flexes. They didn't last too long. These actually, we have to go back and redo the hand pegs on them. But luckily with the hoops every 5 feet, as long as that plastic stays there, it doesn't hurt the tunnels, or the strawberries. The plants don't get hurt at all. So if anybody can find a better way of doing it, but we found also that if you have a sandier soil, then in the winds, those pegs don't stick in the ground. So ours is a clay loam, and it does a much better job. Yeah, I thought about those, but we haven't got those yet, but those may be easier than sticking something back in the ground. But I think they were a little bit more expensive, but they're reusable for years and years. Yeah. Now we do it every 5 feet. So like in between the hoops. Nope. Been there, done that. It's the hand pegs, all right? Hand pegs, or we have, in some cases where we had sandy soil, we actually had to we did the hand pegs, and then at about 4 locations on a 120-foot block, we actually put rebar and had cement blocks on those to keep that down even further. But I have another, yes. This one? About 3 or 4 times a year in the spring. Yeah, well, it's just a windstorm. That's up in Lubbock. Yeah, that's Lubbock, Texas. So you get hurricanes, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we had zippers on our end tunnels, or the ends of our high tunnels, and after about 45 days, they split because of our wind. And so we framed in the front and the back. But I also called the manufacturer and said, hey, you know, I thought these things were guaranteed for 4 years. He goes, no, the zippers are only guaranteed for 30 days. So we went and took the end panels and took them to a tent company, and they put tent material over the zippers, so they haven't split since. But it was just like, what? Yes. Well, the whole purpose is to keep the wind out, because the damage to the plants is the wind as well. So if you can put these tunnels down, keep them down tighter where the wind blows over them, you'll be in much better condition, because a lot of the strawberry plants are sensitive to the high winds, especially when there's debris and dust blowing. Right. Right. Yeah, so you can see here that we do have hedgerows here and over here. Of course, most of the winds are coming out of the south, or the worst winds are coming out of the north when we get the cold temperatures. That's why we put our high tunnels going north and south, so there's less resistance from the wind. All right, we're almost there. But then one grower, he had troubles with his hand peg, so he put soil all along there to keep it down, and that's been a pretty good job. He's the one that I told him to start out small with 1,000 plants. He bought 5,000 instead, so he didn't listen. But I'm working with him, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, so that just shows the tunnels. This is what you can do with those tunnel flex. You can raise them up, keep the rain off. But we also saw over in Poteet with a heavy rain that if the water is standing on those, that can knock the plastic down, and some of the frames or some of the hoops fell over. But this is my production this year. I don't have any in high tunnels. They're all under low tunnels. But here's second year plastic. You can kind of see a difference there between them. But usually by about this time, they're starting to get opaque because we just have so much sun up there. And then I think this is my next to last slide. So this is a California ripeness chart, okay? So they suggest that this is good for picking. This is probably a little overripe for shipping and stuff. So this is what you get when you go to the store, okay? There actually is a grower in Poteet who's picking green berries for pickling. So I've never done that. I've never had a pickled strawberry. But anyway, so this is what you'll generally see in the store. And just to go with that, with our first Walmart project, we did a random taste test or a blind study in College Station. We had about 30 people come, and I brought down 7 varieties that were Texas grown. And then I also went and got a variety, or went to Walmart because it was a Walmart grant, and stuck that in the test. And out of all those 8 varieties, which variety do you think they liked the best? The Walmart one. They weren't ripe, but ours were ripe and had been picked the day before. And why do you think that is? That's what they're used to. That's what they think a strawberry tastes like. Yeah. So, maybe if you're a grower, maybe give out a free sample here and there so people can taste them, so they know what a real strawberry is like. All right. So, all right. We'll be around we are going to go out to the field. Is there a grass driveway?
There is a grass driveway that we can, it's just like the road, one of the farm roads. So we can actually, if you're interested, we can stand on the road and we can take a look at the plot. We have the biostimulants and also we have the fertilizer treatment. But before we step out of here, I want to make an announcement. If you have not received the flyer yet on the community there, there is a hemp workshop that will be held here on February the 6th. So maybe 2 weeks away. So if you are interested, we don't have, if you know it's not operational in Texas yet, but there's a lot of interest in it. So if you just want to